We had long considered Earth a stage play of absurdities, an accidental comedy written by evolution itself. I, archivist 7th class of the Orville Expeditionary Corps, had the privilege, or perhaps punishment, of being assigned the task of observing these primitive bipeds. I was promised challenge, discovery, even a degree of danger. What I encountered instead was a carnival of the ridiculous. Their machines run on liquid fossils. Their conversations consist of pictographic faces known as emojis, and their tribal gatherings revolve around consuming discs of ground animal flesh compressed between two lumps of processed starch. Imagine that, a species that celebrates its survival by eating hamburgers the size of its own infant offspring. And yet, this species has not destroyed itself. That alone requires some respect, or perhaps concern. We first detected them broadcasting nonsense into the void. Endless waves of dramatized conflict they call reality television. I will never forget my first exposure. A group of humans shouted at each other over the ownership of a dwelling. Their behavior was loud, incoherent, and full of references to something called microwave burritos. At first, I thought it was a warning signal, perhaps ritualized combat. But no, it was entertainment. They volunteer to be humiliated for the amusement of others. If that is not primitive, what is? Thus, when the directive arrived, obtain a specimen, catalog its weaknesses, and prepare a comprehensive report on the dangers Earth could present, I felt no hesitation. My team, 6 strong and highly disciplined, regarded the mission as a formality. The Galactic Armies trained for wars that collapse empires in weeks. Earth, by comparison, was a jungle of laughing apes. Still, procedure is procedure. We scouted quietly from low orbit, avoiding their crude satellites and ancient radar systems. The objective was to collect a human unobserved, preferably one unconnected to their governmental or military functions. Our criteria were simple: remote, isolated, no witnesses. What we found seemed perfect. Deep within one of their jungles, a male in his midlife cycle sat beside a riverbank, engaged in the act of pulling fish from the water with a crude line and hook. His clothing was plain, his tools simple: knife, rope, an odd silver cylinder for boiling water. He possessed no communication device, no glowing screen, no companions. He sat alone in silence, occasionally glancing at the sky as if he anticipated something. Naturally, we laughed. This was to be our first subject? A solitary woodsman who entertained himself with sticks and fire? His own species barely cared for him. The pilot asked if we should take 2 or 3, perhaps a female or one of their juveniles for comparison. I declined. 1 specimen was sufficient. There was no risk. We prepared the immobilization beam, tuned it to his physiology, and initiated the extraction sequence. The paralysis was instantaneous. His body froze, his eyes widened, and then he collapsed onto the ground with a satisfying thump. Not even a cry escaped him. The forest remained quiet, broken only by the rush of water. Efficient, clinical, predictable. As we carried him aboard, I inspected his belongings with detached amusement. A roll of adhesive strip he called duct tape, a knife sharpened through repetitive manual labor, packages of desiccated animal protein. I cataloged each with professional disdain. This apparently was survival gear. We bring face shields, nano-repair kits, and fusion cells into the wilderness. He brings tape and dried meat. Primitive does not begin to describe it. My report notes from those initial hours read as follows: specimen acquired without resistance. Cognitive capacity expected to be minimal. Cultural artifacts suggest reliance on crude tools and preserved foods. Danger rating negligible. At the time, I believed those words. I believed them with the certainty of a mathematic proof. Still, procedure demanded more thoroughness. We placed him in the containment chamber, adjusted atmosphere to his requirements, and set monitoring fields around his neural structure. His body lay motionless, the faint rhythmic thump of his cardiac system displaying admirable biological efficiency for such an unrefined creature. As I observed him, I considered the oddity of their wilderness. Earth is full of contradictions. lush vegetation smothered in heat and moisture, crawling with insects and animals that rely on tooth and claw to survive. And yet here lay a human, the supposed apex predator, fragile skin exposed, soft organs vulnerable, relying on simple fire and cloth to endure. By every metric, he should be extinct, and yet he thrives. Humanity thrives. Their population spreads into every climate, even deserts and frozen poles. Perhaps that is their only remarkable quality, stubbornness. They refuse to die. My team, however, found no such intrigue. The biologist prepared scalpels for minor sampling, already imagining how quickly he would publish papers on the neural inferiority of humans. The technician joked about the specimen's clothing, wondering aloud if camouflage shorts could possibly hide him from predators. The pilot declared he looked docile, like an abandoned pet. All laughed. I recorded the observations, but did not join the laughter. My pride is sharper, less inclined to mockery for its own sake. I prefer facts. The human's face fascinated me. Even in paralysis, there was no panic. His eyes, though wide, lacked the glassy sheen of prey. His mouth remained faintly curved, not quite a smile, not quite neutral. Ambiguity. I made a note of it, but considered it irrelevant. What could a jungle primitive possibly know? He was unconscious, helpless, a mere passenger in our superior grasp. We began transport preparations, setting coordinates for orbit where further study could proceed without the distractions of Earth's biting insects and humid air. Systems checked, containment locked, sedation verified. All routine, all flawless. My final glance at the specimen before sealing the chamber remains etched in my sensory ridges even now. For the briefest instant, so brief I questioned whether it was error, his lips moved. Not a twitch, not a spasm, but deliberate motion. A curve upward, a smile. The chamber sealed, the lights dimmed, and yet the image stayed with me. Why would a creature in forced paralysis smile? Fear should have gripped him, or confusion, or anger. Instead, serenity. Something about it unsettled me, though I dismissed the feeling as an indulgence in melodrama. We are not creatures of superstition. We are observers, archivists, warriors of science and discipline. Still, as we ascended from the green canopy of Earth's jungle, carrying this so-called primitive into the void, I could not silence a faint disturbance within my mind. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was instinct. Or perhaps, though I did not dare voice it to my team, the human knew something we did not. We had acquired our specimen. The mission was secure. The report nearly complete. And yet, for the first time in a long career of certainty, I felt a question stir beneath the surface of my arrogance. Why was he smiling? The paralysis was designed to last hours. Our formula had been refined over centuries, tested on hundreds of species across countless worlds. A simple sweep of the beam, and the subject remained inert, neither conscious nor capable of resistance. That was the expectation. That was the certainty, which is why, when a human's eyelids flickered open after a mere span of moments, confusion rippled through the team like static through a faulty comm line. At first, we assumed it accidental neural firing. Muscles occasionally twitched during sedation. It meant nothing. But then his eyes focused, clear, deliberate, and entirely aware. He scanned the chamber, taking in each of us without panic. His gaze rested on me a moment longer than the others, and though my training demanded composure, I felt my inner ridges tighten. This was not the vacant stare of a trapped animal. This was recognition. I composed myself and ordered additional sedation. The biologist prepared the injector, confident the dosage would correct the anomaly. Yet before he could administer it, the human did something altogether unanticipated. He smiled. Not the ambiguous twitch I'd seen earlier, but a full expression, lips curved, eyes narrowing with what I can only describe as amusement. He looked upon us as though we were curiosities in his collection. Then he spoke. His voice was low, unhurried, and strangely calm. So, he said, which one of you is in charge, and which one only thinks he's in charge? The words stunned us into silence. My team glanced toward me instinctively, revealing their own uncertainty. I was quick to respond. insisting that the creature's speech was the product of random firing, perhaps instinctive sound rather than conscious thought. But my defense crumbled when he continued, turning his gaze from one member to the next. "You're the scientist," he said, nodding toward our biologist, too eager to poke and slice. "You're the pilot, now at the helmsman, nervous about turbulence, checking instruments every 3 seconds. And you," his eyes lingered on me again, "you're the one writing the report. Cold voice, precise words, but your eyes give you away. You're already worried." The others shifted uneasily. I felt their confidence waver, though I forbade myself to show weakness. I explained, firmly, that his identifications were no more than lucky guesses. A gambler's trick, a primitive making noise in the dark. Yet the timing of his remarks, the accuracy of his tone, made the explanation feel paper-thin even as I uttered it. He continued before I could silence him. "Nice ship you've got here. Elegant lines. Over-reliance on centralized systems, though. I bet that console overheats if you run too much power through it." He nodded toward the engineering station, exactly where my technician had once complained of thermal faults. My technician blanched. I made a note to discipline him later for such an obvious reaction. I tried again to reassert control, instructing the translator to amplify its corrections, demanding the team treat the human as any other specimen. But the human disrupted every attempt. He leaned back against the chamber wall as though the place were his cabin, not his prison. He spoke casually, freely, as if he were the one conducting the examination. "Beautiful stars out there," he remarked, glancing at the viewing pane. "I counted the course corrections on the way up. 3. You've got a pilot who's careful, maybe too careful. Could have shaved 20 seconds off the ascent if he trusted his thrusters." The pilot's grip tightened on the controls. The human should not have been conscious during transit, much less aware of trajectory adjustments. Sedatives should have blanked his senses, sealed them in darkness. And yet he recited details with calm certainty, as if mocking the very technology we prided ourselves upon. The biologist, growing frustrated, initiated a brain scan. At last, something measurable, something we could reduce to data. But when the waves illuminated the human's cortex, he chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Your scanners hum too loud," he said. "I could hear them from the forest, like cheap bug zappers. You might want to fix that if you're trying to stay secret." I felt my confidence slip. Not collapse, not yet, but tilt as though the floor beneath me had shifted. My training dictated that no subject should ever gain psychological dominance over the observing team. Yet this man, paralyzed minutes ago, now directed the room with his presence alone. His humor made it worse. He looked at our uniforms, pristine, ceremonial, tailored to the pride of the Corps, and said, "You guys look like a boy band reunion tour." The translator rendered the phrase literally, which made no sense, yet his smirk conveyed his intent. He mocked us, and despite our superiority, the jab landed. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "If you think I'm tough, wait till Chuck Norris shows up." The name meant nothing to us, yet the way he delivered it, casual, confident, followed by a wink, sent an involuntary chill along my sensory ridges. My report log from that moment reads, "We do not know this Chuck Norris. We are unsure if it is a weapon, a leader, or a myth. But we are deeply afraid." The technician whispered that we should silence him, perhaps restrain his speech. I rejected the idea at once. To gag a specimen would be to admit fear, and fear was something the Corps did not admit. Still, my refusal carried less conviction than I intended. I tried to redirect the focus toward data, ordering another scan, but the human anticipated the move. He tapped the side of his head, smirking. "Go ahead. I've already figured out how your little toy works. Watch out, though. If you point it at the wrong frequency, you'll fry your processors. Wouldn't want that, would we?" The technician froze. The detail was accurate. How could he know? The silence in the chamber grew oppressive. Each of us waited for the next revelation, the next unsettling observation to fall from his lips. He reclined as though he had all the time in the universe, unhurried, unworried, smiling at us with the confidence of a predator disguised as prey. I wrote in my notes, desperate to retain composure. Specimen demonstrates unusual awareness. Must be coincidence. Must be error. Yet the words felt brittle even as I inscribed them. I had spent a lifetime documenting weaknesses of alien species, confident in the superiority of the core. For the first time, I wondered if the weakness might be ours. The human yawned, as though bored by our attempts at control. Then he leaned forward, eyes bright, tone casual yet sharp as a blade. You think you're studying me, but I've been studying you since the river. And let me tell you, your report is going to look very different from what you expect. The lights flickered, just once for less than a second, but enough to freeze every member of my team. Systems were stable, power uninterrupted, yet the chamber dimmed as though some unseen force passed through it. The human smiled again, wider this time, and in that moment, for the first time in my service, I felt the hair on my sensory ridges rise. The human was not our specimen. He was something else entirely. We initiated the testing phase with a clinical detachment of surgeons, yet unease clung to us like static. The human remained seated, calm, bound by restraints he never once tested, as though escape was unnecessary. He studied us, and that quiet observation unsettled me more than any scream of resistance would have. Our first trial was simple, visual recognition. Shapes projected onto a screen, designed to measure associative reasoning. A circle, a triangle, a square. The expected response from a primitive was hesitation, confusion, perhaps childlike fascination. Instead, he chuckled. What is this, preschool? Next you'll ask me which one of these doesn't belong. Let me guess. You'll give me a cookie if I get it right. The biologist frowned, insisting the translator was malfunctioning. Yet the translator hummed with flawless accuracy. The words were intentional. He leaned closer to the projection and added, by the way, your projector has a dead pixel. Top right corner. You should fix that. And indeed, when I looked, there was a faint flicker at the edge of the display. An imperfection so minor I had never noticed it. We proceeded with logic puzzles, more advanced, designed to push higher cognition. He answered quickly, too quickly, solving equations faster than our monitoring devices could process. But it wasn't the speed alone. Between solutions, he smirked and recited phrases that made no sense. I'll be back. Houston, we have a problem. Say hello to my little friend. The words carried weight, as though meant to intimidate, but context eluded us. The technician muttered that they were code phrases. I wrote in my log, specimen communicates in layered signals. Possible covert background. When he was asked to follow patterns on the wall, he ignored them entirely and turned his gaze directly into one of the observation lenses. He waved. Hi there. Didn't know you had cameras behind that panel. Smart placement, though. Almost invisible, almost. The others shifted uncomfortably. The lens was hidden with precision. No outsider should have detected it. Yet he had. He had not simply participated in the test. He had dismantled it. We turned to neurological scanning, desperate for empirical data. The machine hummed, surrounding his skull with waves of light. The graph spiked in erratic patterns, then stabilized into sequences unlike anything I had recorded. Not chaotic, adaptive. The more we observed, the more his brain seemed to shift, patterns folding into new formations as though anticipating our instruments and adjusting accordingly. The biologist whispered that the equipment must be broken. The pilot, less restrained, muttered that perhaps the human was broken. I knew better. Nothing broken behaves with such deliberate precision. I demanded to know his origin, his function, his reason for such abnormality. He shrugged, casual, as if discussing the weather. I used to serve, he said. Special reconnaissance. Jungle warfare, mostly. Then I moved into security testing. Counterintelligence. My job was to find weaknesses. He leaned back, smiling faintly. And congratulations, you've got plenty. The word struck deeper than I cared to admit. Security testing. Counterintelligence. These were not the pastimes of a primitive. This was training. Purposeful, deliberate. The others looked to me for reassurance, but I found none to give. I attempted to regain ground with derision. You are one man, one organism. Our core spans star systems. He tilted his head. Funny thing about systems, they're only as strong as their weakest link. And you guys have a lot of weak links. For example, he pointed directly at the technician's console. You didn't change the factory password, did you? Still set to default. The technician froze. The human grinned. Don't worry, everyone forgets. But you really shouldn't. The mention of passwords, of vulnerabilities so mundane yet so real, shook us. He should not have known such details, and yet he named them with casual accuracy. He reached down as far as his restraints allowed, brushing the edge of the table where we had placed his belongings. His eyes lingered on the roll of duct tape. With this, I can fix, build, or destroy anything. Amazing stuff. You wouldn't understand. I noted, reluctantly. Subject demonstrates irrational reverence for adhesive strip. Potential symbolic artifact. Yet, deep inside, I wondered if perhaps he was not exaggerating. He began asking us questions, reversing the examination entirely. How many redundancies in your power grid? Where's your emergency venting system? Does your AI run distributed? Or are you foolish enough to centralize everything? Each query struck too close to truth. The biologist snapped that we owed him no answers, but silence served him just as well. He smiled, cataloging our discomfort. Then he dropped his final comment with unsettling nonchalance. I've already sent a message. The chamber stilled. My ridges froze. I forced laughter. Impossible. Our jammers prevent all transmissions. Are you sure? He asked. Or did I just ride your own scanning beam? Bounce a signal you weren't looking for? You don't watch the reverse channels, do you? Most people forget. The others turn to their panels instinctively. I snapped at them to maintain composure, but their hands trembled over the instruments. He had planted doubt, and doubt spreads faster than fire. He leaned forward, voice low, eyes glinting. They know where I am. My people. They'll come. The biologist barked that he was bluffing, but the conviction in his tone eroded that defense. Even I, hardened by years of certainty, felt my confidence fracture. I recorded my notes mechanically, as though routine could shield me. Specimen demonstrates advanced psychological tactics. Utilizes confidence to destabilize team cohesion. Unknown if external message transmitted. The lights flickered again. This time longer, darker. Consoles reset. Momentary lapses of power rippling through the chamber. The technician cursed under his breath. The pilot checked readings twice, then 3 times. All systems reported normal, yet the flicker remained undeniable. The human leaned back, closing his eyes as though enjoying a pleasant breeze. You feel that? He asked softly. That's the sound of your systems unraveling. Don't worry, though. You'll get used to it. We exchanged nervous glances, none willing to voice the fear forming in our throats. He had claimed control, not with strength, not with weapons, but with words. Calm, deliberate, merciless words. For the first time, I realized the truth that had been lurking since the forest. We had not captured a specimen. We had invited a predator into our midst, mistaking his stillness for docility. The flicker passed, lights stabilizing, but the silence it left was suffocating. I ended the session abruptly, instructing the team to regroup, to analyze, to reassert control. Yet, deep down, control already belonged to him. As we filed out, I recorded my final note of the day. For the first time in service, I do not know whether we are observers or prey. The first alarm was small, almost ignorable, a brief chirp from the environmental systems. We dismissed it as interference from the earlier flicker, a coincidence, an inconvenience. But coincidences do not multiply, and within minutes the ship trembled with cascading warnings. Power grids fluctuated, lights strobed unpredictably, and consoles reported anomalies too varied to reconcile. It was as though the vessel itself had become aware of our arrogance and chosen to rebel. The human sat motionless in his chair, restraints still intact, eyes half-lidded in a posture that suggested serenity. His calm contrasted so sharply with our growing panic that it mocked us without words. Then, when the alarms reached their crescendo, he opened his eyes and smiled as though unveiling a trick. "You centralized everything," he murmured. "One brain for the whole ship. Makes it easier to manage, sure. Makes it easier to break, too." We demanded answers from each other, issuing conflicting orders, scrambling across consoles that now rejected our commands. The technician slammed his claws against the panel, trying override after override, only to find the system locked him out. The pilot shouted for auxiliary control, but auxiliary control had already sealed. Every door, every system, every circuit responded as though guided by an intelligence no longer ours. The human tilted his head. "Funny thing about scanners," he said conversationally. "They don't just read. They can write, too. I'll let your machine map me." And then I used the feedback to slip a few instructions in. Just a little push, a little whisper, and now your ship is listening to me instead of you. The words chilled me more than the alarms. He had turned our own precision instruments against us, not through violence, but through comprehension. He had understood their function while under sedation, then repurposed them to his advantage. A jungle dweller, a supposed primitive, had outmaneuvered the finest technology of the Corps. The biologist accused him of lying, of bluffing with empty words. But the human only gestured toward the corridor behind him. The doors slid shut without a command, locking our soldiers outside. Their fists pounded against the metal, muffled cries seeping through as systems denied them entry. He had not lied. He had orchestrated this with elegance. "Centralized systems," he repeated softly. "Always a mistake." Our pride unraveled in that moment. The team that once sneered at duct tape and dried meat now looked at him with the dawning recognition that his tools were subtler, his weapons invisible. I attempted to salvage composure, to remind him that the Corps was vast, that one ship meant nothing, that his victory, if such it was, would die here. He met my statement with a faint shrug. "You still don't get it. I'm not here to win a fight. I'm here to test you. And you failed." The phrase echoed in my mind like a hammer strike. Failed. We, the proud archivists of civilizations, reduced as subjects in an experiment run by the very species we mocked. My ridges burned with humiliation. The pilot whispered that perhaps we could negotiate, bargain for release. The biologist snapped that negotiation with a specimen was beneath us. Yet both spoke with desperation, their authority splintering. I alone remained silent, watching the human as he leaned back in his chair, utterly at ease, the embodiment of control. He explained further, voice measured, deliberate. Earth was not as we believed. Primitive on the surface, yes, but beneath that surface, careful watchers. Cloaked satellites hidden beyond orbit. Deep space monitors disguised as debris. Training programs built not for conquest, but for survival against predators like us. "You think we're loud because of our television and our hamburgers," he said. "But you weren't watching the quiet parts. You weren't watching the jungles. That's where we keep the ones like me." I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as bravado. But the evidence surrounded us. Our ship, our fortress, now served him. The technician muttered that perhaps we could physically overpower him, that restraints or sedation could still work. Yet none moved. Something in his composure stopped us. It was not just confidence, it was inevitability. He did not need to fight us. He had already won. The alarms ceased, one by one, until silence returned. The lights steadied. The air grew still. And then the ship's central AI spoke, not in our clipped tones, but in human words, translated into our language with perfect inflection. Directive accepted. Awaiting further instructions. He smiled again. "See? Even your machine knows who's in charge now." The biologist collapsed into his chair. The pilot covered his eyes with trembling hands. The technician muttered apologies to no one in particular. Only I remained upright, though the weight in my chest threatened to crush me. The human leaned forward, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. "Your people aren't the first to visit. They won't be the last. But here's the thing. You come here thinking we're weak, thinking we're prey, and you leave learning the same lesson every predator learns when it steps into a jungle. The jungle always wins." His words struck with the inevitability of prophecy. The jungle, Earth, was not chaotic wilderness but design, patient, watchful, lethal in its quiet. We had mistaken noise for weakness and silence for emptiness. Now he knew better. He rose from his chair, restraints parting as though they had never mattered. He moved not with haste but with deliberate grace, as though the ship itself parted for him. He paused at the door, glancing back at me. His final words were delivered with a wink I still cannot erase from memory. Chuck Norris sends his regards. The doors sealed behind him, and I was left staring at the empty chair where arrogance had turned to ruin. In the silence that followed, my team whispered questions, desperate, incoherent. What would happen to us? Would the correspond? Could we undo his sabotage? I had no answers. All I had was reflection. We had come to mock Earth, to catalog its wilderness as a curiosity. We had laughed at its duct tape, its burritos, its strange cultural idols. Yet in our laughter, we revealed our blindness. The wilderness is not weakness. It is persistence, adaptation, resilience. It is the smile of a man who knows more than he reveals. I compose my final note, not as a report, but as confession. We came as conquerors. We leave as prey. Earth is no primitive world. It is a jungle, and the jungle always wins.